Hey 915 Talk listeners, this is the 915 Talk host, Andy Frecka. I do appreciate you listening to 915 Talk here in the podcast. As I hope you know, 915 Talk is originally recorded as a live radio broadcast on KELP Christian Radio in El Paso, Texas. And what that means is, if there's a technical issue or some kind of malfunction, we just have to go with it because we're on live radio. And that's what happened right at the beginning of this broadcast. My guest, Dr. David Yates, was on the microphone and his microphone was not working. So we had to take a quick break right at the beginning. And then for the rest of the time, about an hour, Dr. Yates and I swung the microphone back and forth to each other. And it worked out okay in the end. And I do appreciate Dr. Yates's flexibility in the matter. But I just wanted to say that so that, first of all, you'll listen. Please make it through the first few minutes. Dr. Yates has some stories that really just stunned me, and you'll see I'm just at a loss of words for a few times in the interview just because the information he's given me is beyond anything that I've ever encountered in my life. So without further ado, here's my wide-ranging conversation with the one and only Dr. David Yates on 915 Talk.
915 TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? Live from the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Good afternoon, beautiful citizens of the Borderland. This is 915 Talk. The world is looking at El Paso. What will we say to the world? And this is faith-based radio where we believe that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And we know that that applies to each of us individually, and it applies to our region, it applies to our cities. And I hope that as we have these conversations each Friday live at 4 p.m. that we will learn to love this region that we call home more and more. And I want to jump right into it today. We have a very special guest. I've been so excited about this conversation for weeks. I hope that you will join in the conversation. I'm going to say this right from the bat, right from the very beginning. I hope you'll join the conversation. The way you do that is when you're listening to the conversation today, you text in your questions and comments. So you can do that at 915-265-8489. Our guest today is what I would call a true El Paso patriot. He is an organist and also dabbles with the French horn. He is a member in fine standing with the American Dorper Sheep Breeders Association. He is perhaps the source of the most mirthful guffaw in the Borderland, and I hope that he will demonstrate that for us at least once today. And also in very narrow athletic circles, he is widely considered to be a pickleball prodigy. He is an occasional member of the El Paso Corral. He is a guinea hen rancher, and according to my sources, he is a fantastic chef. Now, beyond that, I have to go to his webpage. So I hope it's been updated recently. He is Dr. David Yates. He is a DMD, MD, FACS, or FACS, is passionate about serving children with cranial and facial deformities and cleft lip and palate. He is a board-certified oral and maxillofacial surgeon and was recently awarded the inaugural Physician of the Year award by El Paso Children's Hospital. He is the division chief of cranial and facial surgery at El Paso Children's Hospital and has been critical in bringing complex craniofacial surgery to the region. We're definitely going to talk about that today. In addition to being a partner with High Desert Oral and Facial Surgery, he directs the craniofacial clinic at El Paso Children's Hospital and the craniofacial clinic at Providence Memorial Hospital. He has also been integral in starting a clinic for children with cleft lip and palate in Juarez, Mexico at the Hospital de la Familia. He serves on the National Committee for Cleft Craniofacial and Pediatric Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery and is a reviewer for the Cleft Palate and Craniofacial Journal. He regularly participates in international humanitarian trips. He recently returned from international trips, so we're definitely going to get into that, for cleft lip and palate and craniofacial surgery, and has been featured in multiple news stories about the children he has impacted. He gives numerous presentations at conferences around the country and has operated from kids from all over the world. So wherever you are right now, whether you're in Clint, Socorro, maybe you're over in Deming and Hatch, maybe you're in Las Cruces, maybe you're down south in the beautiful city of Juarez, in Mexico, or maybe you're up north in New Mexico in the town of Oro Grande. Unless you're driving, I want you to put your hands together for the one, the only Dr. David Yates! So, Dr. Yates, welcome to the show.
Wow, that was incredible.
That is so great to hear. Yes, we definitely need to we need to learn to celebrate each other more and more. So I hope we do that during this program. So it's super exciting to have you here. And I think for those of you who are listening, you're thinking craniofacial surgery. What does that have to do with anything? But what I want to start off with is a little bit about who you are as a person. And regardless if someone is passionate about craniofacial surgery or not, I hope that they'll see your love for the city. And I believe that we are not here on earth just to wait for our time to go up to heaven. I believe that we are here to live our lives to the fullest and to serve our neighbors and our communities. And I think you're such a great example of that. But to start off, before we get into the surgery, I want to talk a little bit about the Dorper breed of sheep.
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I think we all know that the Dorper breed of sheep is probably the Angus of the sheep breeding community.
I think Wagyu would be a more appropriate comparison.
There's nothing on the sheep? Okay, yeah, come over here. Yeah, so we're having an issue with the microphone. I don't know why it went out.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Nothing? Yeah. Kenny on the board's yelling at me. All right, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. Very sorry for these technical issues to start off with. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Hey, El Paso and Southern New Mexico. Thank you for listening to 915 Talk. KELP Christian Radio would love to just build a relationship with you, hear from you, get your feedback on all of the programs. You can send your feedback by going to the contact form at kelpradio.com and just sending us a note, letting us know what programs you love, and that really helps us as we pray for the future. Also, please be sure to follow us on Facebook. You'll find us at the page is called KELP Christian Radio, and just hit that follow button, and then you can keep up with the latest station news. Finally, and probably most importantly, go to kelpradio.com and look for that 915 pray link, especially if you've been missing the 9:15 a.m. and 9:15 p.m. prayer for the 915. Listen to a few of those prayer requests and join us in prayer. Let's continue to pray together and believe together for our region.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
We are back, and we don't know what happened, but one of our microphones just went out. So Dr. Yates, he's very good on the fly. We're going to be sharing a microphone, but we were talking about just love for the borderland, love for our community, love for our neighbors, living a life to the fullest. And I think that Dr. Yates is such a good example of that. And we were talking about the Dorper breed of sheep. And I know that all of our listeners know that the Dorper is considered to be the Angus breed of sheep. But I want to know, Dr. Yates, why did when you decided to become a farmer, a sheep herder, as it were, why did you choose the Dorper breed?
Yes, well, thank you so much. And, I hate to correct you right out of the gates, but, I think it's more, a better comparison would be Wagyu, okay? And we are shepherds in our family and are passionate mostly about eating lamb. But it turns out Dorpers are not only delicious, and we've learned most of what we know about Dorpers from the Wikipedia page, but they are also self-shearing.
Self-shearing sheep.
Yeah, so you don't need to shear them, which in a desert climate is critical.
Right.
So they really are perfect for this environment.
So you decided on a breed of sheep that it only provides meat, but no wool.
Well, yes, but they do have skins. So their skins are actually really highly valued for their rug and ornamental potential. So.
Okay, so you decided to become a sheep herder. You chose the Dorper sheep because El Paso is home. You live here in the desert. You didn't really see a market for the wool, right? But related to that, everybody has chickens, right? Everybody has chickens. But you also chose to have guinea hens. And I find that to be so interesting because guinea hens are probably like a watchdog in the sense that they really make a lot of noise. So why did you choose to have guinea hens in your backyard?
Well, the Dorpers are actually South African in descent. And guinea hens are also South African, so I thought it would be nice to have a friend from home. And also, when I bought the guinea hens, they were just cute little chicks, and I didn't realize that they turned into dinosaur birds. If you haven't seen them, they're worth Googling.
Okay, so you have dinosaur birds in your backyard, you have sheep in your backyard, okay, and you really enjoy music. You really enjoy music. So with that, you chose to study the organ, from what I understand. Is that right? And so, I mean, since you're a doctor and an organist, I think we could do a pun about internal medicine, but we won't. But what I want to know is, and I am going somewhere with this, why did you choose such an unusual instrument that's not very mobile, not very good for the marching band? Why did you choose the organ?
So I started with the piano, but then I went to Wheaton College, and at Wheaton College, they have one of the most magnificent organs in all of Chicago. And people don't realize this, but just one note that you play on the organ is a 32-foot pipe, which is a 3-story building. I mean, these are massive instruments, and you play one note and the entire building shakes.
Wow.
And so there was that, but then also, I mean, I'll never forget, I was with one of my professors of organ. He played an organ piece for all of us in the class. And there's something called the cross motif that Bach wrote into a lot of the music. And especially during the moments of the Passion of Christ in masses, he would put in the cross motif, which was significant. It actually makes the form of a cross. And so you have little crosses all through the music. And I just thought that was incredible. I'll never forget this moment. He played this for our entire class, and this piece was so stirring and so powerful. No one spoke afterwards for, like a minute. And then he spoke, and he said, better than a sermon.
Wow, I love it. I do love the organ, and I think that's what I want to say about all of this is we're talking about playing the organ. We're talking about guinea hens. We're talking about the Dorper breed of sheep. And in the middle of all this, you're a surgeon. You are a surgeon, and you've made El Paso your home. I'm sure that you had a choice other than a guinea hen. You had a choice other than Dorper sheep. You had a choice other than the organ. And you had a choice other than El Paso. So why did you choose El Paso?
So after fellowship, we were interviewing all around the country. And we had never been to El Paso, but I had done a lot of training in Dallas, and everyone made fun of El Paso. But we heard it was a region that was underserved. So we're like, let's check it out. And so when we came here and checked it out, we were like actually wowed by its natural beauty. We had no idea there were mountains here. The climate was great. My wife is Venezuelan, and we really wanted our kids to grow up being bilingual in Spanish and English. But really what got us here was, one, the incredible need. So kids, it was one of the largest cities in the country that was completely underserved without cleft and without craniofacial surgery, especially. And kids were driving 10 hours away in every direction to Dallas, to San Antonio, to Phoenix, to Denver, in order to get these services. And, a lot of kids in our community aren't super wealthy. And so this was a huge stress on these families. And they were having to go for multiple visits. And there were literally hundreds of kids that my partner brought up that were needing these services, that were having to go all over. And I had no idea of the need. And so Mariana and I, we really just started praying about the decision, and it's one of those times in life where I really have felt the Lord's leading and have felt God direct us here.
That's super amazing. I love hearing in the middle of all this, there's a need and there's the Lord's leading. You're talking about children being underserved where before, I guess they wouldn't have to just drive for hours. They probably have to fly to another city. Is that right?
Yes, but there just weren't there aren't a lot of it's a lot of money. Okay. So, a lot of these families would drive, and some of these surgeries are super invasive. We're taking off the whole skull. We're moving the entire face from the skull. And these kids need to recover for weeks in the cities where they're going. So it's a huge economic burden,
Right. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do next is going to see, after such a from the heart thing you've just said, okay, the next thing I'm going to do is going to seem a little petty, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to test your knowledge of El Paso.
Okay. Oh, this is great.
Yeah, we're going to test just how quick you are on the feet, on your feet. I think you're going to do okay. But this is our we're going to ask questions in a quick succession. So for those of you who aren't here at the studio, we're sharing a microphone. It's a little awkward, but we're good friends, so we're okay. And I know if you can handle the pressure of surgery, you can handle this. So I want you to answer the questions as quickly as you can. There are right or wrong answers. However, we will not ridicule you too strongly for wrong answers, okay? So without further ado, Kenny on the board, cue up the lightning round.
Lightning round.
Okay, first question. And the first three questions are always the same. Then they change a little bit, okay? First question, red or green?
Green.
Okay. Where?
Shirt.
Yes, that was the wrong answer. That was the wrong answer. So my guide, my North Star for El Paso, don't worry, last week, Mr. Steve Castorita also answered the question wrong. He said stoplight, which makes more sense than shirt. But what is your favorite Mexican restaurant where you do answer the question red or green?
I know this. Chico's Tacos.
Chico. So Chico's Tacos is your favorite restaurant. I think you're in. I think you won the whole round. There's no need to ask any more questions. Yeah. So we'll continue on. But you do like red salsa more than the green. Is that right? Or is that wrong?
I like green.
You like green. That is the correct answer. Green is always the correct answer. Okay. So next question. You have a guest coming to El Paso. They're a good friend. They're such a good friend that you're not putting them up at a motel. You're not even putting them up in a casita or anything like that. They're staying in your home. You really want to impress them. Where do you take them in El Paso that's not a restaurant?
Scenic Drive.
Scenic Drive. Okay, they're very good. Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. What a great view. Okay. Now, you know the Central Square in El Paso. What's it called?
San Jacinto.
San Jacinto Plaza, that's correct. And you know there's an alligator theme.
Yes.
There is a sculpture in the center of San Jacinto Plaza of alligators.
Yes.
How many alligators are featured in this sculpture?
Well, we call them cocodrilos, and there's 3.
There's 3! After the program's over, if someone's listening and they really want to go down a rabbit hole, you definitely need to look up the story of those alligators. One of them ended up at El Paso High School. Yeah, and I just think that's great. And we're talking 50 plus years ago. I think the best part of that story to me is that at the time it just seemed normal to everyone to have an alligator at the hospital. And I think they should have made the mascot an alligator after that, because that would have just totally confounded all of their opposition in sports. Okay, we are a Christian radio station, so a piece of Bible trivia. So, after Jesus rose from the dead, two of his disciples raced to the empty tomb. Who were those disciples, and which one of them got to the tomb first?
John and Mark. And John got there first.
Halfway. Okay, so John was one of them. Mark was not another one. It was Peter. Yeah, he's saying Peter. Yeah, he doesn't. I have the microphone now. He doesn't. But it was Peter, and John won. And he wrote that about himself, which is great. Like, let everyone know for all time, I run faster than the old man Peter. So okay. I've learned through my sources, and as I tell all my guests, I have sources everywhere. Okay, that you love Handel's Messiah.
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Yates confirms that he does love Handel's Messiah. Handel's Messiah was originally composed for Christmas. True or false?
False.
Okay, so tell me about your love for Handel's Messiah, and what holiday was it actually originally written for?
So it was written for Easter.
Yes.
And, I love everything about Handel's Messiah. I feel like it's just a beautiful example of Baroque style music. It's in English, which of course makes it a little bit easier. And I think it's really, and once you dive into actually what he was doing during that, I think it's really incredible. For example, basically all of the music is straight quoting of Scripture. So if you can sing the music, you can quote an hour and a half of Scripture. Wow. And then I think the other thing that's really, really cool is it starts by going through all of the Old Testament prophecies that prophesied the Messiah. And then, of course, it ends, with the incredible, any song that is amen and just is one word and can go on for 8 minutes. That's awesome.
Wow. That's super cool. Super cool. Well done, Dr. Yates. You pass. All right. Well done. You passed with flying colors the lightning round. Let's talk a little bit about, probably a lot about craniofacial surgery, what you're bringing to the Borderland. But this is always my question when I see a doctor with kind of what I consider to be a narrow, not narrow, but a specialty. You're not a pediatrician. You're not a family doctor. You chose craniofacial surgery. And it's kind of like, when you go to the circus and you see an elephant balancing on a big ball, yeah. And then there's a guy standing on the elephant's back, and the guy's blindfolded, yeah. And then he's juggling flaming swords. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then you're like, how did he get into that kind of thing?
Yes.
So I feel the same way when I think about doctors who have kind of a specific focus, a specialty. So how did you get into craniofacial surgery?
Yes, great question. So my dad is a dentist, and I couldn't decide between dental school and medical school. So during college, I went and I worked at this hospital for the poor in Mexico, which was actually in the Baja, for 2 months. And I was mostly in the dental unit, but I was also in the medical unit. And these oral maxillofacial surgeons would fly in and do these awesome surgeries, which sadly I never actually got to see one. But then I started reading a biography of this guy who actually helped start the Mercy Ships. And
Don Stevens.
And he the facial surgeon on there, he was an oral maxillofacial surgeon, and he would do these crazy surgeries on kids with facial deformities. And he had gone to dental school first. So I was like, well, since I can't decide between dental school and medical school, maybe I'll go to dental school first, and if I'm passionate about more, I'll do medical school, and then I'll do these kids with facial deformities. And so that's kind of how I got into it, and I went to dental school, and I didn't fall in love completely with, just restorations and teeth, and I wanted to do surgery. And so then I decided to go to medical school, and then I did a residency in maxillofacial surgery and then a fellowship in cleft and craniofacial surgery. And I didn't know at the time that there were only 7 in the country. Otherwise, I probably would have thought a little bit more broad about my options. And thankfully, ended up doing what I'm doing, and I absolutely love it. And I think it's an incredible way to be able to, really have this intimate experience with patients and their families, and I get to see them from birth to the time they grow up and be adults. So it's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. That is amazing. Just a reminder, if you just tuned in, we are talking to Dr. David Yates. He is a craniofacial surgeon at El Paso Children's Hospital. And if you have questions, please text them in to 915-265-8489. Or if you have a comment, 915-265-8489. We get to as many of them as we can. So craniofacial surgery, I think the surgery of most when it comes to that is cleft palate. I'm sure there are many others that you could tell us about. Is that mainly like for cosmetic reasons you do those surgeries, or is there something beyond the cosmetic, the way someone looks, that is involved in those surgeries?
Yeah, so probably some of the most common are cleft lip and palate and craniosynostosis. Cleft lip and palate, when you see a kid born with cleft lip and palate, thankfully, almost all the time, intellectually, they are completely intact. These are normal kids, but that are just born with severe facial deformities. And unfortunately, when you think about having a cleft through your face, it can affect your eye. Some of these kids are blind. It can affect your breathing. Their noses are misaligned, and it can affect, obviously, the ability to eat because everything they put in their mouth comes out of their nose. And then it affects the speech. So as these kids are talking, if they're unable to close the mouth from the nose, you sound very hypernasal, which sounds like this: Peter Piper pizza. Mm-hmm. And they're not able to form the Peter Piper pizza or cookies, cake, and ice cream. So it's, cleft lip and palate is very important for speech, very important, obviously, for cosmetics. These kids, I always tell people, what I love about operating on these kids is they don't want to just walk into a room and everyone just think they're the most beautiful person in the room. They just want to walk in a room and not be made fun of, mm-hmm. And not be noticed. Mm-hmm. They just want to blend in. And it's a very different outlook on cosmetics. And then the kids with craniosynostosis, those kids' heads are fused. And they need to be released because literally their brain is squished and is unable to grow. So, kids with craniosynostosis, if it's not corrected, they can go blind in the worst cases. They can die, but they are intellectually delayed and affected. So this is like, life-giving treatment.
Right. Okay. So I understand cleft palate is way beyond being cosmetic. Synostosis is where the cranium stops growing?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to dive a little deeper into that. I didn't even know that that's something that happens. So tell us a little bit more about that. How often does it happen? Just tell us more.
Yeah, it's actually one of the most common facial and skull deformities. And, basically what happens, and the great thing is that we are in a region that is full of crystal skulls. So everyone knows what a skull looks like here. Right. And when you look at a skull, you see squiggly lines.
Okay.
Okay? Those squiggly lines are sutures. And those sutures allow growth. So when your brain is growing as a child, and this is why babies have such big heads, their brain is the first thing to really grow. And stops growing, by the way, pretty much by 5 to 6 years of age. But those squiggly lines, as the brain grows, that's where the bone grows.
Okay.
So without a brain, your head doesn't grow. It stays extremely small. But because your brain is growing, the skull grows where those sutures are. What happens with these kids, which this is actually very common, it's 1 in 2,000 live births. And what happens is one of those squiggly lines on the skull is absent. And when that line is absent at birth, the kid's head takes on a super deformed shape. But more than the deformation is the damage it's doing to the brain underneath, which is why we need to fix it.
Okay. So I'm a little slow, and I'm trying to catch up, and I feel like I might not be the only one. So the skull stops growing. Essentially, what on earth can be done about that?
So this is something I'm very excited to talk about because here at El Paso Children's Hospital and at our unit, the craniofacial unit, we are leaders in the minimally invasive surgery technique for craniosynostosis. We have kids coming from all over the world. This year alone, we've had them come from Mexico City, from New Zealand. We just had one from Canada, all over the United States. And they are coming because there is a minimally invasive way to treat this. Now, before I get into that, the prior way was that we would have to wait for these kids to get old enough to be able to endure the operation. The operation that we would have to do would involve removing half to all of their skull. This kid, as you can imagine, could be very dangerous. The average blood loss during these cases used to be 80 to 120%. So before we even started cutting, we would have blood being given to the baby.
Right.
And so these were very, very difficult surgeries for families, and there still can be relapse afterwards. So even though you've done the surgery, the patients can relapse in some of the circumstances. So not ideal, but I am very thankful for a man, David Jimenez, who actually also was a believer.
Okay.
He died almost exactly a year ago.
Okay.
And he was a great friend of mine and a mentor. And he, 28 years ago, developed a minimally invasive surgery technique, which he would tell everyone that God gave to him in a dream.
Wow.
Because his wife was pregnant at the time, and he's like, what am I going to do if a baby is born and has this? And the idea of doing this huge surgery was so overwhelming for him. He's like, there's got to be a better way. So he went to bed, and he claimed that God gave him he's like, I woke up the next morning, and I knew exactly what I needed to do, step by step by step by step by step. He's like, and so what he did, though, was not only do the surgeries, but he recorded everything. And that attention to detail and that monitoring of these patients for over 27 years was an incredible library of patients that it was shown that this technique works. And so now this is the technique that's done at Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard. This is the technique that is really being adopted all over the world. And we have an international symposium that we put on every other year in El Paso teaching this technique to surgeons from all over the world. But what it is really simple. It's beautiful in its simplicity. So basically that suture that is fused, that little squiggly line that is missing from the skull, when the baby is 2 months old, you basically make a small incision that's 1 inch. We take an endoscope, that's basically a small little camera on a scope, and we dissect the brain from the bone, and we dissect the skin from the bone. And then where that squiggly line was, we put it back. Which, instead of losing 100% of this patient's blood, our average is less than 2 tablespoons of blood. Our average transfusion rate for blood is less than 5% instead of 100%. The kids, instead of staying in the hospital for 5 nights, they stay 1 night and go home the next day. We did 2 of them yesterday. They both went home this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Kitty on the board, for a little humorous relief. That is amazing, and I think, as you're explaining this to us, I see Kitty on the board in the background just saying, "Wow." I'm sitting here trying to understand what you're describing in my own mind. It's, for someone who barely got out of high school, this is so beyond any of my understanding. But I look at that, and so David Jimenez is the name.
Yes.
Was he here in El Paso, or where was he?
So, another great story. So David Jimenez figured this out in Missouri, and then he became chairman of neurosurgery at UT San Antonio, and he became one of the, if not the most famous pediatric neurosurgeon in the world. And then when he was in San Antonio, he had all these kids being shipped to him from all over the world, but he had a lot of kids being sent from El Paso, not only for this, but for brain tumors and other things. And he decided that he wanted to, San Antonio had services. He built an incredible program there. He decided in his last part of his life, he's like, I have one more program to build. I want to go somewhere that has very limited resources and needs a pediatric neurosurgeon. And so he too could have gone, he could have gone anywhere in the world. And this man fell in love with El Paso. And he fell in love with the people of El Paso and the hospital, El Paso Children's Hospital. And he fell in love with the mountains. And he was an incredible human being, who really, really loved people. And he basically took me under his wing, and we did hundreds of these cases together. And then he also hired on another neurosurgeon, Dr. Makushi. And Dr. Makushi is my partner now in all of these. And so we're a team, and we operate together. But yeah, so Jimenez ended up here in a similar way, but he loved being here. He was only here 5 years before he passed, and he just passed exactly a year ago, basically. And we had a surgery that morning he passed. But he chose to be buried here. His wife still lives here, and they love it here. So,
yeah, I this is for those of you who are listening. I want you to know I'm hearing this for the very first time. Dr. Yates and I have had many conversations over the past couple of years, but this is the first time I've ever heard this. Dr. David Jimenez, who prayed that God would give an answer. I love that we serve an endlessly creative God. Who has answers for serving every person, not only in the Borderland, not only here, but all around the world. And I love Dr. Jimenez's love for El Paso. That's so inspiring. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break here in just a moment, just a 2-minute break. I remind you that if you do have questions for Dr. Yates, please send them in to 915-265-8489. That's 915-265-8489. We're going to take a 2-minute break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Hey, El Paso and Southern New Mexico. Thank you for listening to 915 Talk. KELP Christian Radio would love to just build a relationship with you, hear from you, get your feedback on all of the programs. You can send your feedback by going to the contact form at kelpradio.com and just sending us a note, letting us know what programs you love. And that really helps us as we pray for the future. Also, please be sure to follow us on Facebook. You'll find us at the page is called KELP Christian Radio, and just hit that follow button, and then you can keep up with the latest station news. Finally, and probably most importantly, go to kelpradio.com and look for that 915 pray link, especially if you've been missing the 9:15 a.m. and 9:15 p.m. prayer for the 915. Listen to a few of those prayer requests and join us in prayer. Let's continue to pray together and believe together for our region.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
Listening to 915 Talk. I am your host, Andy Frecka. I am here with Dr. David Yates, a craniofacial surgeon at El Paso Children's Hospital. We're talking about this new surgery, and it's especially new for El Paso. And we're talking about where the surgery came from. And I know in a previous conversation, Dr. Yates, we talked about these helmets that are part of the program. So tell me a little bit about where do helmets come in with this surgery?
Yes. So helmets are critical actually to the success of this. So basically we make that little suture, that squiggly line in the patient's skull. And then the brain grows rapidly. And as the brain is growing, the helmet basically prevents growth from happening further in the deformed areas. And it encourages growth in the non-deformed areas. Does that make sense?
I think so. So what is the age of most of these children that you are performing surgery on?
So really, the ideal age is 2 months. So these babies weigh, we've done a baby that weighs 5 pounds.
Wow. Okay. So if I'm understanding, I do not have a medical background, let alone a medical degree, that you're performing this surgery on essentially a newborn baby. Their skull is probably softer then, and after the surgery, the baby continues to grow, and the helmet helps it create the correct shape. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is great. This is probably something that not many of y'all know, but skull growth. So in the first few months of life, your skull, and I'm talking about the circumference, grows 2 centimeters a month.
Wow.
By 18 months of age, your skull growth has slowed down so much that for the next 18 months, it only grows a total of 2 centimeters.
Wow. Okay. that is super interesting. So here in El Paso, you are performing this surgery. How many other places around the United States is this surgery being performed?
Yeah, and so one more quick thing with that. So baby skulls are, as you said, very soft. You can just cut with scissors the bone in a baby that's...
I won't.
So in a baby that's 2 months old, you can just cut the bone with scissors.
Wow.
But, for you or me, you cut any bone and it's going to be with a saw. And so, for a baby, it's nothing. And you can actually remove the majority of bone if you were to want to, and they will grow it back. But if you put a quarter-size defect in an adult, that's not going to grow back with bone. So anyway, to answer your question, so how many places are doing this? Well, it's very regional. So thankfully, in the United States, now the majority of big centers, and by big centers, I mean, big cities have big children's hospitals. Now a lot of these are being performed. But still, these are rare-ish, so there's not many of them being performed, which is why people still choose to come here a lot. Now, in countries, it's much rarer. So in New Zealand, there are 0 providers that do this, which is why we have patients come from New Zealand. But also Europe's the same way. So there just now are 2 units in Britain that are doing it. And then, but there was no one in Belgium. So we had a patient from Belgium come. But people, thankfully, more and more surgeons are doing this. And it's really a testament to God's work through David Jimenez.
Wow, that is amazing. And I know you are traveling internationally. You just returned from a trip to Mexico City. Is this what you were lecturing on? This surgery? And I heard you had 500 students at your lecture, which is way more than you would normally have for a lecture in the United States. Were they all actual medical students, or was it just a few doctors who paid some extras to come in to build up the hype? What was happening with 500 students in Mexico City? And what is their goal in all of this?
Yeah, no, it was actually a really cool conference held in Mexico City. I think my brethren in the Borderlands will be proud of me. My worst grade during my 16 years of education was actually in Spanish. But at this event, I did 7 hours of lecture in Spanish. So I've come far. Wow. But yes, there were 500 surgeons. So maxillofacial surgeons. Most of them were actually surgeons operating in hospitals, but some of them were residents or fellows. They were from all over Mexico and Latin America. And this is one of their major conferences. And I was talking about a lot of different surgeries, but indeed, one of the ones that I was really focusing on was endoscopic, minimally invasive surgery for craniosynostosis. And there was a lot of interest.
So do you think Mexico will eventually build a program like you have here in El Paso? Is that the goal or the plan or the desire? What's going on with that?
So I'm very excited. We actually, at our last international symposium here at El Paso Children's Hospital, we had one of the surgeons from Monterrey, a neurosurgeon from Monterrey, Mexico, come to our conference. And so he is now doing them in Mexico City, and then it will be in Monterrey. There's also one other surgeon in Mexico City also now doing them. So it's exciting to see it grow, and I believe also there will be surgeons coming up from Mexico City to our next symposium, which is in November here at El Paso Children's Hospital.
Let me ask you personally, do you have a goal for building these programs around the world? Or somehow investing in those programs, or what is your personal vision in all of this, as it seems to be, for lack of a better term, gaining popularity around the world?
Well, I think for me is, and as a surgeon who was doing these big surgeries on these kids, and these surgeries can have consequences. They don't always go how you want them to. And I think, being involved in some of these surgeries, the way we used to do them, I really started just wanting to have the best outcomes. And then thankfully, God brought David Jimenez into my life. And all of a sudden, by no credit of my own, I became one of the leading surgeons for these surgeries worldwide. And all of this was unexpected and I don't think really merited. But I think my goal, and this was David's goal too, and this is what I loved about him, he didn't care if he was the one doing them. Now it's great to be busy with surgery, but really what he wanted was what is best for the kids. And he was just so passionate about sharing this because it is such a life-changing difference to get this surgery as a minimally invasive surgery when they're younger, when their brains are less likely to be affected by the pressure than when they're older. And so I think my goal, really is taken a lot from his mentorship of me, which is, I want to share this surgery because that's the right thing to do. And I want kids around the world who are born with this condition to be able to get this locally. That is a much better option than flying halfway around the world for it. Even though that's cool, yeah. It's better if they can have highly trained people near them.
Okay, yeah, wow. I love that. I love the vision for local. I love the global vision. And at the beginning of the program, I was when I gave your very long introduction. We talked about what you're doing in Juarez. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because our listening area actually is Juarez, El Paso metro area, and southern New Mexico, Las Cruces, and then up to kind of the Oro Grande through Chaparral. But with Juarez, what is happening there? What's the vision? What's the plan?
Yes, Juarez is actually very exciting. So Juarez, prior to our clinic, did not have any really cleft or craniofacial clinic. They did have every 6 months people were running missions, which was very important. But as I said, these kids have speech issues, feeding issues, and they need a team. And so I'm so thankful. We're now a combined team from Juarez and El Paso. And Dr. Chow, both Dr. Chow's, audiologist and ENT, come with us. Dr. Diamond, he's a fantastic hand surgeon at El Paso Children's Hospital. Dana, who is a speech and language pathologist, comes with us. And then we have local partners in Juarez who are dentists, nurses, pediatricians, and we all come together in a team in a way that we do it in the United States, but also in a way that it should be done, because it's really comprehensive care for these kids. And so we run for us it's pro bono, but there, because they have to pay their medical staff, it's a sliding scale. So every single person who comes is taken care of, regardless of how much money they make. And what we do is it's a sliding scale. If they can pay, great. If they can't pay, great. We still see them. We treat them all the same way. And we do surgeries over there. So the surgery, for example, a cleft lip surgery here, costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, because there's a lot of costs associated with hospitals. However, in Juarez, we're able to do a cleft lip surgery for $500. So I tell everyone, hey, you want to change a kid's life? You just donate $500 and we can do it.
Wow. Just when I think you've said something that there couldn't be anything that's more amazing, you drop that one on us. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Here at KELP, this is 915 Talk. It's every Friday at 4 p.m. where we talk about the border region. Where we're learning to love this community. But every weekday, there's another program. It's called 915 Pray. And so at 9:15 a.m. and 9:15 p.m., we have just united prayer for the Borderland. And next week, the prayer is going to be focused on the medical community. And some of the doctors that you even know are going to be leading prayers next week for 915 Pray. So just with these few minutes that are left, what I would like to hear from you is, what is your dream for El Paso, for the border region in the area of medicine, or to put it in more religious Christian terms, what is your prayer?
Great question, Andy. Yeah, I think I have a couple prayers. But, I think one of them would be that kids don't have to leave any longer for services. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, in facial deformities, we're there. But for hearts, we're not. For some other complex disorders, we're not. And we've made incredible progress with the children's hospitals in the last 10 years. But that would be, I think, one of my big prayers, that kids don't have to leave anymore, that we can take care of these here. And also that we would become, because I don't know if you realize this, so craniofacial team-wise, the closest craniofacial team is, 350, 400 miles away. That's ACPA approved. So we're an island, but that we could be a beacon of hope to kids in our area, whether it be Mexico or southern New Mexico or, or any of West Texas. And that we could also just kind of be a shining light of how we should take care of our kids.
Yeah, I love that. El Paso is kind of an island in the middle of the desert. You can drive in almost any direction, and it's a lot of sand without a lot of population for a long period of time. I love the the desire to make it where it is, like in your words, a beacon of hope, a place that is already home for these children. So it should be home for them, for their medical care as well. We shouldn't have to look outside of the borderland for those needs. I hope that for our listening audience that you will join with that prayer. That next week during 915 Pray, that you'll join along with those prayers that are brought in by those doctors. So we're kind of just entering the last bit of our program. My very last question. You are Dr. David Yates, and your wife is Dr. Mariana Yates. What do I need to do to get Dr. Mariana Yates to come out to 915 Talk?
Well, good luck with that. She's booked up for like 8 months. Good luck. But she's, I don't know. I mean, I could sweet talk her maybe, see what I can do.
All right. Thank you much. Any last words before we close out?
Yes. You said I did awesome on the quiz, but is there a prize?
Yes, there is a prize. Kenny on the board's pointing it out. You get it. This KELP just celebrated 40 years, but we found a box full of 30-year anniversary mugs, and so we're giving those away till we run out. And then once we make the 40-year mugs, after these all run out, we'll definitely get you one of those. For those of you who are listening, if you would like to somehow be in touch with what Dr. Yates is doing, you can just Google Dr. David Yates, and you should find the webpage, Dr. as in Dr. drdavidmyates.com. The phone number is 915-833-2969. Again, that's 915-833-2969. And of course, you can get in touch with El Paso Children's Hospital. Also, if you enjoyed the program, you can suggest 915 Talk to your friends. This will rebroadcast tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on KELP. And past programs you can find on KELPradio.com and iHeart, Spotify, and even YouTube. I'm a little bit afraid of what this YouTube video is going to look like after, but I do appreciate, Dr. Yates, your level of flexibility as we've swung this microphone back and forth over the past hour and just talked about El Paso, learning to love the city, learning to love the region, and just learning about really God's creativity, God's love for the children, and how he's expressing that both through you and your team. Thanks again for coming. And thank you to everyone for listening. You've been listening to 915 Talk.
You have been listening to 915 Talk on KELP Christian Radio. To listen to past recordings of 915 Talk, just visit KELPradio.com and click on the 915 Talk link. Until next time, love your neighbor, love your city, and give God all the glory.